100 years ago this year, Puerto Ricans became American citizens, but the relationship between the U.S. and this island territory has always been complicated, to say the least. To mark this centennial, Puerto Rican-born and Brooklyn-based artist Miguel Luciano, working with our BRIC contemporary art team, has created a new exhibit called Ride or Die. It'll be unveiled a week from tomorrow, February 2nd, right behind us. Write that down, here at the BRIC Gallery. We're going to meet Miguel in a minute, but first, let's take a look at this.
All right, I know what I'm doing February 2nd, but now it's time to meet the man, the myth, the legend, the biker. Miguel, welcome to BK Live.
Thanks for having me.
So Puerto Rico, 100 years later, there's a lot of things happening on that island. How do you distill and translate and put that on two wheels?
That's a great question. I mean, that's what the show attempts to do through bicycles, which is in some ways not what you'd think about first in terms of thinking about the island crisis. So we have it is the centennial mark of our citizenship, 2017. We became citizens through the Jones Act in 1917, which also made us eligible for the draft, and immediately were drafted into the wars. And Puerto Ricans actually have the highest combat mortality rate of any other ethnic group in the military. But we don't have the power to elect the leaders that send us to war. So it's a very, very kind of complicated relationship in terms of how citizenship plays out if you reside stateside versus on the island. But these are long-standing issues. We're still a colony of the U.S. Island territory, Commonwealth. We are essentially a colony.
So not that you're the representative of the Puerto Rican people, but you're in the seat. Are people on the split more for citizenship or independence now at this moment, with all of the economic upheaval and knowing things like the mortality rate for people who serve in the armed forces from Puerto Rico? What do you feel the split is?
I mean, that's just like, those are old issues in terms of like understanding our citizenship.
Okay.
But I think the question you're asking is about statehood versus independence.
Right.
Like the political status of the island is probably the most contentious issue, always has been.
Yeah.
And that's not being close to resolved at this point. But what did happen recently is we had also an election in Puerto Rico, and the island elected a pro-statehood government or leadership. Yeah. And which is very right-wing and very conservative and very pro-American, wants to become the 51st state. The irony of that is that advocating for statehood as a nation of people of color, as a Caribbean island is black and brown.
Yeah, in the age of Trump.
In the age of Trump, that you are advocating towards the most openly racist anti-people of color administration that any of us have seen in our lifetime. Yeah. So it's an ironic moment for that proposal, in my view. But I also don't support that sort of politic anyways.
Where do you find that support is in Puerto Rico in terms of people wanting to become a state versus the other people? Does it go right down the middle, 50-50 sort of deal? It's,
I mean, a lot of people want to support the status quo, which is to be somewhere in between, as a Commonwealth territory, which is our colonial kind of status that's been allowed us to be really belong to, but not be part of completely the U.S. But we still have maintained this kind of illusion of autonomy without having, complete rights as self-determined people. We don't control our economy and government entirely. So we had the Promesa bill. We're also in a huge crisis financially, right? Yeah. It's a lot to unpack, but we're $70 billion in debt, and there's no option for bankruptcy, and it's a huge, huge crisis. Hospitals and schools are closing, public facilities. And the Promesa bill, the ironically titled Promesa bill, does not bail out Puerto Rico. It ensures ways for investors to get paid,
money back, yeah.
and ensures the poverty of future generations. And that's the biggest controversy right now.
So this is the backdrop
Yeah.
in front of which you are making art and changing the way that we think about two-wheeled transportation,
Yeah.
even with all these crazy custom things that you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm trying to merge all of these kinds of issues with some objects of popular culture, right? Specifically bicycles. And
Right.
so Schwinn bikes in particular are something like here in Brooklyn.
Heritage brand. It's the American bicycle.
It is vintage Americana. It
Yeah.
is, and they come, from like auto culture, like American automobile culture of the 50s.
Fenders. And
Yeah,
those
yeah, they're
lines.
modeled after all those.
Yeah.
So they were also the first bikes that were imported in the island, among the first bikes.
Okay.
And so we're really popular among folks that came to New York, for example, and created bike clubs that were recreating these bikes from their childhood in Puerto Rico through this very American Schwinn, classic Schwinns from the 50s, 60s, early 70s. And so we've got Puerto Rican Schwinn clubs that have been in New York for years and years. Most of them are based in Brooklyn.
Why don't I know about these Puerto
never
Rican
seen these
bike
guys?
clubs? It's like,
We want in.
Where have you been?
Where have I been?
You've never seen a
Where
bike,
to go?
like an old school bike covered in Puerto Rican flags coming down the street?
Listen, I used to live in South Berg, so I seen lots of Puerto Rican
Yeah.
flags on bikes. I know there was a club.
Well, there's lots of different clubs. But I mean, in general,
Yeah.
like the culture of New Yorican sort of
Pimping
bike
out your
culture.
ride, yes.
Yeah, has been around for a very long time in a special way in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So my studio's been in Bushwick for like over 15 years. Most of the oldest clubs were based in Bushwick. And so they're really aficionados of the bikes themselves. Classic Schwinns, 1950s and 60s into the early 70s are the most prized bikes.
Yeah.
So what I've done is created new sculpture using these vintage bikes and putting sort of history in conversation with contemporary culture and popular culture by recreating this kind of historic ephemera and modifying it.
That's great. We're so looking forward to this exhibit here, right behind us in the gallery there. I just want to briefly talk about the history of your art. When did you know that you wanted to be an artist? Was it from a young age?
Yeah, I was always, from a young age, drawing, and I knew I was going to do it. That would be my thing.
So,
No, you go, Brian, please.
I just want to get to the treats. You have this moving, this art on wheels, the piragua.
Yeah.
So explain that to our artists.
So that was
to
to your artist audience.
Yeah.
The Piragua cart is the first bike that I built actually as a sculptural project.
It was the first one.
It was a public art project with the Queens Museum originally, and it was made here in Brooklyn. But it's inspired by, piraguas are the shaved ice that you see on the homemade push carts. Exactly. So that's like one of the oldest startup businesses for Latinos in New York. You know. So it's a very simple business that you can make yourself by a push cart, block of ice, some natural syrups.
Hold on, let me write this down.
Yeah. I'll give you recipes.
Please.
So this was a way of commemorating that by kind of merging it with a bike and creating this very fancy, kind of like tricked out version of what is really humble and kind of old tradition, nostalgic tradition. But it's recreating island culture in the city.
Yeah.
Is what I loved about it.
Well, we're an island.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true. And it's only something you can do in the summertime.
Right.
But they're also like completely like, it's a part of New York City's sort of like street culture.
Yeah,
that's
it's revolutionary in the same way. Like it's that sort of outsider economy thing. Like
Absolutely.
You don't need to go and buy a
Absolutely.
good humor from the store. You got your neighbor who's.
Well, it's also like it's not the people's pops, at the smorgasbord or whatever, where you pay for the.
They've been here. They're our friends.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, that is an adaptation of something that's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So like the hipster version of it versus like the what has been in Latino neighborhoods in New York City for a very long time. Yeah. So I wanted to commemorate that tradition, and that's what Pimp My Piragua is about. Now this Piragua card has like video and
It's
music
got its own Twitter account.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a GPS system. It's got its own Instagram. It doesn't have an Instagram, but
Before we get out of here, in all of the press materials that came from BRIC, you're described as a mid-career artist.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you are in the middle of your career now, as the art world sees it, how do you think living in this environment with what's happening on the island and with who's in the White House might affect the trajectory of your career and the kind of work that you're interested in doing?
That's a good question. I don't know. You know, I read that I was also mid-career
Yeah.
in the text. So
Good to know, right?
yeah. But listen, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, for this to be 2017, to be able to sort of to comment on what's happening, both on the island and here. And the work really is about sort of how the island crisis relates to the diaspora. And New York City has been the center of the Puerto Rican diaspora, historically speaking, for forever, you know, in this country. And so I'm really proud to have this opportunity here and to sort of like ask these questions openly through the work, because I think we need to ask questions constantly, whether you're an artist, whether you're, you know, a newscaster. It's a time where everything needs to be questioned.
Well,
even the facts, right?
Even the facts.
Yeah.
Alternative facts.
Yeah, alternative facts, right?
Jinx. All right. Ride or Die is the exhibit.
Yeah.
It's happening right here at BRIC House. We're at 647 Fulton. It starts February 2nd, and you got to come down.
It starts February 1st is the opening.
February 1st is the opening.
Yeah,
Come
yeah,
on down to BRIC
There'll
House.
be wine.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah, there'll be wine, says
But
Brian.
there's also some other events surrounding, including a meetup in February that's like
Yeah.
steps from here.
If you want to know more about the Puerto Rico crisis, February 8th, we have a panel discussion with people a lot smarter than me talking about the crisis. We're making it legible to me and others. And February 25th, there's a bike meetup happening with City Point. And that'll be a big, you know, sort of bike get-together.
You can win a Schwinn.
You can bring your bike. You can win a Schwinn. That's true.
I'll be there.
Miguel Luciano, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you for bringing your art to the gallery. We
He's
can't
got to
wait to
go
check it
install
out.
the work now.
Yeah, he's
so.
installing it as we speak. We'll check it out in the weeks to come. Miguel, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.